We go. All right, this is Marty Wilson speaking. I'm sitting with Warren Miller. Everybody knows him as Mickey Miller. It's August 30th, 2022, about 10 o'clock in the morning, give or take, and we're sitting in the home of Mickey Miller. We're here to talk about his life in Barrett Township. But apparently you were not born in Barrett Township,
No.
so let's start with where and when you were born and who your parents were.
Well, I was born in a little town called Waverly. It's outside of Clark Summit, and I was born on my grandfather's farm on Mellers Road, and it's still Mellers Road today. And I was born in April the 1st in 1931.
And your parents were?
Oh, my parents were John and Martha Miller.
Yeah.
My father grew up on the farm.
Okay.
It was a family farm,
and you decided not to follow?
To follow him.
Yeah.
And I lived in Waverly, and then I went to grade school in Clark Summit. And then my parents moved to Wilkes-Barre. And of course I went with them, and I went to high school in Wilkes-Barre. Yeah. Elmer Myers High School, which they closed this year. And then I went on to Syracuse University, and
What'd you study?
well, I was kind of in just liberal arts, and I was going to go into the ministry and social work like that, and then I worked here for 2 summers as a summer job while I was in college. And over here at Mrs. Williams's drugstore, and a whole bunch of us worked there as young people. And then I met my wife, who lived here. She also was going to Syracuse. So then things just went on, and when we got out of college, we got married, and I came back here, and my Pam's parents and grandparents sold Price Lumber over the road here. It was a family business for 3 generations. And so I went to work there, but then I decided, I didn't know if I liked the lumber business. So I went with J.C. Penney, and I was in their management program for a couple of years. And I ended up out in Du Bois, Pennsylvania as a manager of a store. And then my wife's parents were getting older, and so I thought it was time for me to come back. So I came back and joined the lumber company and worked there for 60 years.
So Pam was, I thought your wife's name was Mary Ann.
What's that?
You said Pam.
Oh, I'm sorry, my wife was Mary Ann.
Mary Ann.
Mary Ann, yeah. Pam is our daughter.
Right,
I'm
right.
sorry.
So Mary Ann's parents
owned.
Gotcha.
And her grandfather started the business. And it was in the family all the way down to, about 6 years ago. And it was getting too much for me, my age and competition and everything. So that's when I sold the business, and so I live here with the dog.
How did you, as a college student, get a job here in Mountainhome?
Well, it was interesting. My father was a Marts bus driver, and he drove from Scranton into New York, and he had this woman passenger. Her name was Mrs. Williams. She used to go into New York a lot, and she owned Williams's drugstore over here. You probably remember that.
On the right as you go out?
As you go over on the right, it's just been remodeled on the outside.
Okay.
Right across from the Ford, or next to the Ford garage.
Yes, I know.
And so my father was talking to her one day, and she says, well, I hire young people in the summer, to work in my drugstore. It was a huge place over there at that time. So I came up, and we became very good friends. And as I say, I worked there 2 summers.
Where'd you live when you were working there? Did she provide a house for you to live in?
Oh, we all lived upstairs. Well, there wasn't that many. There was about 6 of us. And we lived upstairs over the drugstore.
Okay.
I often go by there now and look up and look at those windows and think, I lived in that bedroom one time. And so that's how I ended up here. And I've been very happy here.
Did you meet Marianne here or at college?
Here. It was interesting. There was a girl who I was working with, and when she knew I was going to college at Syracuse, she said, oh, my friend is going to college. So then she introduced me to Marianne, and we were together 60-some years. Yeah, it's... But I've enjoyed living here. It's a nice place to live.
You must have seen a lot of changes, which I want...
Well, not really. I don't think the area has changed that much. Of course, Weiler Brush came, and that was one of the bigger changes. Then the school system, of course, that became bigger, Now it's all consolidated, and we had our own grade school over here, and we had a high school over here. In fact, Marianne graduated from that high school, which is no longer there. And but at that time it was very interesting. There was like Coolbaugh, Tobyhanna, Mount Pocono, Tannersville. There was big competition between the schools. They were smaller, but competition. And the big thing was basketball.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody went to the basketball games, and that was big. And in fact, we have the basketball scoreboard from our school in our museum now. And all the guys and girls come in and say, oh, I remember that one. That was up on the wall in the gym. And,
well, I remember the gym was sort of the center of the building, if I remember correctly.
Right. It was a brick building over along the road here. And back then, the resort industry was larger than it is today. We had, we have Skytop today, which is doing very well. Buck Hill, the hotel is no longer there. And at one time, we had 35 small hotels in Buck Hill and Skytop, and small boarding houses in Barrett Township alone. And now we have about 6. And so the resort industry was real big at that time, but now it's kind of...
I got up here a couple of minutes early. I told you I took a little spin around to see my childhood haunts. Where the fire company is now, I distinctly remember there was a boarding house.
A boarding house there.
Do you remember what it was? Or who
I think it was the Mountainhome Inn, or it was owned by the Geisingers. And in fact, Marianne and I at one time almost bought that inn, and we were going to restore it and live there. But I just decided, no, that building's too big and need too many repairs. And then it became, in the beginning it was called St. Luke's Home for Children, and they brought homeless children up there. And then Mount Airy bought it, and then they demolished it, and that's where the fire company is now.
I remember distinctly as a kid, the woman coming over to the fence. I was in the backyard of the YMCA, and she came over to the fence. I was with my dad. And John Forsythe was up from New York playing at Pocono
Playhouse.
And I had no idea who John Forsythe was, but somebody said he's the biggest star. So apparently the stars would come up from New York and live.
Oh yeah, they would board there. And Pocono Playhouse was quite an attraction back then. I remember we had season tickets to that, and they had a lot of well-known people come there. Gloria Vanderbilt, I remember, came, and Van Johnson, and it was nice, and that brought a lot of people in. They had 2 matinees a week, and then they would come in to the matinees and have a lunch at one of the local, restaurants. And And of course, that's no longer there. But there's talk people want to, I heard somebody bought that property and they want to restore it. I don't know if that, I won't, I don't think I'll ever see that. But, you know, things like that, it was a real happy, active community, but now it's not like that. And, but so I've seen a lot of changes, and not for the better. And
What's the biggest change, do you think?
the biggest change?
Yeah.
Well, I think the biggest probably was when they took the inn down, and you know, a lot of the small businesses have gone, and it's sad when you drive around, especially down through Canadensis. That used to be a building, you know, that corner was very, I don't know if you remember, there was the building is there, Schaefer's Gift Shop. It was right on the corner, right across from the church. And when I first came here, the road kind of curved around in a different direction. And Mr. Schaefer in the summer brought Indians in from out west, and they had teepees there.
Yeah.
And they lived there for the summer, and they demonstrated their jewelry making and all that. And of course, that faded away, you know.
That was a tourist attraction?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes.
Well, what was it like with Buck Hill being here? I mean, Buck Hill was more of a, didn't it contribute to the community?
It was. It was the center of the community. Like when Marianne was going to school over there, they would have a lot of their big functions at Buck Hill in the auditorium. They graduated in the auditorium at Buck Hill. And because they didn't have, you know, the big facility over there big enough. And I can remember the movies.
Right.
They always had movies. I think it was on the weekends, and we'd go up to the movies, and you know, at Christmas and things like that, holidays, it was so pretty to go up there and see the decorations, and it was just a sad thing to see that go. But the community up there is really growing. There are over 300 homes in Buck Hill now.
Wow.
And that's kind of the place to live, is in Buck Hill.
Yeah.
And
Well, a lot of out of towners, right?
most of them, they're out of town, New York and Philadelphia. But I met a lot of interesting families up there over the years.
Yeah.
There was one family, a doctor and his wife, Dr. Scott, and he would pull up in front of the store with his wife, and I'd say to the guys, "Come here, I want to show you something." He would get out of the car, walk around, open the door for his wife, help her out, close the door, and come in the store. And I used to think, now, would you do that for your wife? You know, things like that. Dr. Thompson was another big family up there. And, of course, Buck Hill, too, was the founder of United Churches. They were really predominant in having church conferences and things like that. And out in our station, we have a plaque dedicated to Buck Hill and the organization of churches, Protestant churches. And so there, you know, that's gone. And it was interesting, Buck Hill brought in a lot of black people into our community. And, you know, they were all accepted well. And out here we had a restaurant, down from the station. And it was built by, the Walkers, I think it was. They were a black family. And they built it for the employees of the different hotels, the black people. But their food was so good, everybody in town went there. And, you know, things like that, that's gone now. And, but as I say, Weiler, I don't know if you have ever met the Weilers.
No, I've driven by it.
They're very good people.
Yeah.
The Weiler Foundation.
Great.
They're the ones that own the property where our station is. He takes care of the station, the research center, pays all our bills, and just spent over $100,000 on the station, refurbishing a new floor and all that. And they're very good, like to our local library. They've helped that. And the Weiler family and foundation is a big asset to our community. And he comes to all our things we have at the station. We just had a big day this past Sunday. We have, it's real interesting, Steamtown sets up trains, passenger trains to come from Steamtown to our station. And this past Sunday we had 120 people on it. And they come down, you know, it's a scenic tour for them. We sell hot dogs, we have a big tent, we have a band and all activities for them. And it's a wonderful thing. And Steamtown is very active in that, but I think we'll have maybe one more. We'll have one in the fall. And so just things like that, you know.
Well,
Don't worry about that.
All right, well, let's talk about the store.
The what?
The store.
Okay.
It was a lumber store.
Well, it started out, as lumber, and my wife's grandfather invented a sprag. I might have one around here somewhere. It was a long torpedo piece of lumber made out of hardwood. It was about this long. And what it was, in the mines up in Scranton, they would have the coal cars that would come down, you know, into the mines, and they had no way of stopping those coal cars. So my wife's grandfather, we have the machine, it's still over in one of our buildings, their buildings, and he invented this sprag. And they would have a runner, and he would run along, and when they'd want to stop the car, he would poke it in the wheels, the metal wheel, you know, go around and stop it. Yeah. And we have pictures out on our station. That building right across the street, right on the end there, was the sprag mill. And we have pictures out at the station where there were hundreds of sprags laying there. And he became known all over Pennsylvania for the sprags that he invented.
No kidding.
Yeah, I'll find one before you leave and show it to you.
So they harvested the trees around here to make the sprags?
Yes, it had to be hardwood, oak. And and then of course back then we when I went there we sold groceries. We had flour and sugar. We sold eggs and milk.
No kidding. What year are we talking about here? Roughly, I mean the 50s?
Yes.
50s?
And I remember we sold canned goods, and women would bring in their canning stuff, you know, we would sell. And then of course we had the hardware. And then my wife, both of us were very interested in antiques, and we had the upstairs. It was like a museum where we brought in antiques, you know, and everybody looked forward to coming to our upstairs. And,
I remember that, and I also remember, by the way, you had penny candy.
Penny candy.
Yeah,
that was a big thing.
After school, every day
I can still remember some little guys coming in with 5 or 10 cents and putting their nose up to that counter. What am I going to spend it on?
Well, for a dime, I could get 20 of those red dollars. I don't forget what red hot dollars.
Okay.
Put them in a little bag on my bicycle, and I was a happy trooper.
Okay. And back then, we had what they call a spur, and it came from the Cresco station right in along there. It was a railroad track. And so we got all our lumber and cement and all big items we would get it by the carload. and they would bring it in. They would have one engine, and they would bring it in and leave it at the store. They gave us 2 days to unload a car, or we had to pay what we called demurrage. And I can still remember cement. That would come up from Portland down in there, you know, and the bags would be hot yet. They just manufactured it. So we wanted to get that car empty by noon so we could come home and take a shower. And things like that, you know. And of course, then it became trucking, you know, everything came by truck, and they did away with we call it the siding. You can still see out at the station where it came in through the woods. And, you know, things like that. And then, of course, back then, you know, everybody came to our business, you know, locally. But then competition became a big
Well,
problem.
I remember the A&P across the street.
Across the street, yes.
When did that open? Do you remember that?
I'm not sure when that opened. That was probably in the 50s. And then there was a grocery store down as you go up 191, right on the corner there. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
Right down from it was right there on the corner.
Yeah.
Now there's a church there. And there was a grocery store there. And there's a grocery store in Canadensis. Dan's had a grocery store. So that's all gone now, you know.
Yeah, people drive and get their groceries
Right.
in Stroudsburg.
Oh, we go to Lewis's, which is right over at the top of the hill here. And they're a good family-oriented business. And then we have our churches, and it's kind of sad. We're losing some of our churches. We had a Moravian church in Canadensis. You went down to the red light, and you turned left there. It was a nice Moravian church, and I remember when that was built. That was probably in the 50s. Bob Michaels and his family, almost hand by hand, built that stone church, and that's gone now. And then they closed St. Bernadette's, that's the Catholic church in Canadensis, and now it's over here in the old Monsignor school.
Okay.
And if you get a chance, you want to go and see the church in there. It's absolutely beautiful.
The one here in Canadensis?
No, over
the new
here.
one over here.
They closed St. Bernadette's, they closed St. Mary's up in Mount Pocono, and St. Anne's and Tobyhanna, but they brought a lot of the relics over there to the old school building.
Gotcha.
And they had a big open house on Sunday. I wasn't able to get to it, but so, you know, the churches back then, I think, was more of a vital part of our lives, you know.
Well, you were very active in the
Methodist church there, and still am. And of course, my wife grew up there, and yeah, we were very happy there. But well, I probably shouldn't say it, but I don't think churches are that important today in the lives of people, especially young people.
Right.
And so that's another thing that's kind of going by the.
What do you remember about that church?
What do I remember?
Yeah, I ran across just 2 days ago. Somebody showed me some old Pocono record, or I guess it was the Daily Record, photographs of Tom Thumb weddings.
Oh,
from
yeah.
the church. Do you remember those? What was that all about?
Well, that was a program for young people, kids. The women would do that. They would resurrect like a regular wedding, and they would dress these young people up like older people in the church, you know, and they would stage this wedding called a Tom Thumb wedding, and each one in the wedding represented an older person in the church. It was fun, you know, things like that. It's they're all kind of forgotten, you know, and young people, we used to take them up to Pocono Plateau. That's the camp up on 191, which is still there. And we used to take them up there, and you know, they would have such a good time and things like that. And but I don't know, that isn't as popular as it used to be. And we used to have a lot of church suppers. We always look forward to church suppers. You know, Aunt Susie's pies or Aunt Bessie's cakes, and you know, things like that. And
Do you remember?
but people don't have time for that anymore, which is sad. You know, there's other activities in people's lives today that, you know, they get involved with, which is fine. I'm not. So, I don't know what else I can say.
Do you remember any of the ministers?
What's that?
Any of the ministers? Do you remember any of them specifically? Do you have?
Oh, I remember Reverend Carter, Bob Mongold. Probably when you were here, Reverend McMurray.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I think he was here. He was here for quite a while. And in fact, he married Mary Ann and me. And yeah, Reverend McMurray. And then we've had two women. Well, we have a lady right now, Reverend Swan. And that was a very important part of our lives. And so.
And right behind the church was the YMCA.
Right down there, yes.
Right, there's nothing there now. It was
just the building.
Just the building. It was church property to begin with.
It is.
And the Y rented it.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a center of the community as well, the YMCA?
Right, I remember that. We had that there. And, that was a Schaefer property. And I'm not quite sure how the church received that. If it was a donation. No, I know how it was. Mr. Cresco, Mr. S.S. Cresco, you know, lived here, their summer home. Mm-hmm. And he bought that building and then gave it to the church and was really instrumental in getting the Y there. And and they lived right up the road from.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know Cresco?
Oh, yes. I didn't know Mr. Cresco that well, but after he passed away, well, they were members of our church. And somehow I got involved. I used to go and pick her up on Sundays and bring her to church. And then I would take her home after church, and I was always invited in, and we would talk, you know. And it was so interesting talking to her, you know, about her husband and the business and how it grew and everything. And yeah, so that's how that building became ours, through the Crescos.
Crescos don't own that property anymore.
No.
Do you know who does?
Well, it's there for a while. Buck's owned it. Do you know, remember Frank Buck? He had the big truck agency over in Tannersville.
Oh, I remember the name.
Frank Buck and Susan Buck owned that. And then they parted, and now I understand it's Airbnb or something.
Oh.
Which, yeah, I know for a fact it is, because I talked to the manager who lives up there. But it's a very interesting property. It's big. And
Monroe County Historical Association had an open, they used to have places, they would have open houses, you could visit houses, and several years ago that was on it, and so I've been in it.
Yeah.
As part of that tour.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it was a house tour we had, I think. Yeah. Well, my wife organized it, and all these houses were open. And then we went to different places at the end for like tea, you know, and cookies and things like that, but no more. My wife was very active in doing things like that. She liked to go out and raise money for the church, you know, or she was always involved in some activity, you know.
Well, as a kid, I remember she was sort of a force in the community. That's the way I remember.
Oh, I'll agree with you on that. Yes, yeah. She was. And even today, people remember that, you know. She was organist at the church for 60 years.
Oh, yeah.
she took up music up when she went to Syracuse, and she was organist there for 60 years. It was kind of sad. She said, "I want to die at the organ." So the last Sunday that she was able, we got her there. I sat her on the bench. I stood behind her and held her, and she played for the service. And then the following week she passed away.
No kidding.
But that was, so yeah, she was a really strong person. I give her more credit than, I followed along, but she had the ambition and the ideas, and you know, she, yep, very active person. Yeah. So.
Well, you mentioned the high school, Barrett High School, but I remember distinctly as a kid, behind Mixed Motors, there was an old. Can you talk about? Do you know anything about that building?
Oh yeah. Geez, I wish you were out at the station. We have all these pictures. Yeah, it was a 4-room schoolhouse back there, and right along the road down here, the building went when I sold that property. There's a red building almost across from Mix, and you can tell it was a 1-room school. And that was the first 1-room school in Barrett Township here. And you can still recognize it as a school when you drive by. And then they built that building across the street, and I think there were 6 rooms in it. And my father-in-law went to that building, that school. And I remember, it was kind of interesting. It was getting pretty dilapidated. So we used to like to go over, you know, and just go in and look around. And I went over one Sunday and stepped on a rusty nail and ended up with a real bad infection. And everybody said, that's what you get for going in there. And then they tore that down. And we have some of the memorabilia from that school out to our station. And then they built the one over, you know, the Barrett, the brick one, yes. And so but as I say, that's gone now. And up in the back, there was the elementary, you know, from the jointure, and that's closed now. See, everything is consolidated over in Swiftwater. And so.
Well, you've lived through quite a lot of change here.
A lot of changes.
A lot of community events and
a lot of changes, yeah. No, I've had a very happy, successful life, and I owe a lot of it to my wife. You know, she was the force behind me, and my daughter has turned out a lot like Marianne. She's a businesswoman and raised 2 good sons and now a grandson, and she looks after me and the dog. She calls me every day at 5:15 and wants to know how I'm doing. So.
Well, you've had a very fulfilling life.
I have, yes, I have, and I don't regret anything.
Are there other things that I should have asked you about? Other things that?
Oh, I don't know what else there.
We talked about the Y. We talked about the church, playhouse, Buck Hill. Just think, what else is around here? The schools, of course.
The schools. I was on the school board for 12 years.
Oh yeah.
I was president of the Pocono Mountain School District when they consolidated, and also, and that was very interesting. You know.
What big stories from your tenure do you remember?
Well, the one big story was our school district was the first district in Pennsylvania to strike. We were the first one. We made kind of history.
When was that? Do you remember the year, roughly?
That was back in probably the 60s. I'm not sure the year. But that was a very difficult situation, you know, and I can remember going over, you know, and the teachers hollering at us, you know.
What was the issue? Pay?
What's that?
What was the issue? What were they?
The issue was pay, and you know, probably class size, and but I think it was more the pay issue, yes, and it had become such a big district, you know, and I was on the board when the Votech was formed down in Tannersville.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how active that is now, but that was an interesting situation, you know. It was something that was really needed, you know. Every student doesn't want to go to college, you know.
Right.
And there's other professions, plumbers, electricians, mechanics, you know, that, and those jobs are just as important as a college profession job. And, so the VOTEC was something that was really needed in our community, and I'm not exactly sure. I haven't been down there in a long time, and but it was just interesting, the competition between the local schools. You know, as I say, basketball was the big thing, and today's schools have become so big, you know, and the emphasis is on football and all these other activities, and I don't know, I think back then the kids were getting a more better education, you know. Now today there's so many other things that are activities that have come up, and a young person today is involved, you know, in so much. Well, that's all part of life, I guess, and I've noticed it with my grandsons. They both have gotten wonderful educations, master's degrees, and but the one living next door, I can tell my daughter, I don't understand young people today, the way they live. You know, their life is so different. You know, the family isn't the center of it, you know. One's going here, one's going there, you know, one's going in this activity, and I just feel it's different, and it's hard for young people today. And but I don't know what else I can tell you.
What about the train? Now the train was, how big a deal was the train in town?
That was big back up to about 1989. The train that went from Buffalo to Hoboken.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Scranton was a big stop, and Barrett was a big stop here. I can remember on a Sunday afternoon, the 5 o'clock train, you couldn't get a parking place out there. The fathers, you know, would come for the weekend, but then they would all go back to work, and the families were here in the various hotels and everything. No, it was, that train was something. I can remember, there were maybe 3 or 4 couples. We would get the 6 o'clock train from here into Hoboken. We would take the tubes over to New York, you know, and here we spent the day in New York City. And then we came back on the Phoebe Snow at night.
Oh, okay.
And my wife always wanted to eat on the train. That was luxury, and it was.
Yeah.
And so, of course, that all petered out, and there's only one track out there now. And there's talk, but it's been for several years, that they want to bring the train back. But I'm not going to see that in my lifetime.
I've been hearing that forever, right?
It's going to cost, I don't know how much money. And but it was very interesting. The train brought a lot into our town, you know. And,
well, when you traveled as a college student to get your job here, did you come on the train? Is that how you got here? You drive.
Yeah.
Did you take the train into Stroudsburg very often, or was that you just drove to Stroudsburg?
Well, it was when I worked, I told you I was in a training program for J.C. Penney. And at that time, J.C. Penney was a big store. It was on the corner of 6th and Main. Right on the corner there. It was a big store. And so I didn't have, in the beginning, I don't think I had a car of my own. And so sometimes I would go back and forth in the train from here to Stroudsburg. Not that often, but and that's another thing which I find is getting difficult. All these stores are going out of business, and young people today haven't had a chance to witness them. Sears and Roebuck, the catalog, J.C. Penney's is probably going to be the next one. That radio store.
Radio Shack?
Yeah, that's gone, and that was all part of our lives, these stores. And as I say, the Sears and Roebuck catalog, we kind of look forward to that. And young people don't have a chance. They call Amazon. I noticed that with my grandson, They just pick up the phone, and the next day the thing is on their porch, the item. And I feel that's they're missing out on so much. And
Well, how often would you go to Stroudsburg to go to the stores? Did you go to Wyckoff's a lot?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we used to eat in Wyckoff's, the tea room in the back.
Yeah.
And I remember Mr. Wyckoff. He always had some candy in his pocket. And, if kids came in, he always had some candy to hand out to. That's another Wyckoff. On Friday night, everybody would go to Stroudsburg. You'd go to Stroudsburg and walk, you'd see all our neighbors down there. So we'd sit on the bench and talk. That's a big thing, Friday night in Stroudsburg. Yeah. And Newberry's, and that's all gone. Yeah. And that was all part of our lives, getting out and witnessing and seeing these people. And I don't know. I guess change may be good. I don't know.
Well, you can't stop it, right? It's going to happen. Things are going to change.
Right.
Well, that was very interesting. I don't want to shut this off unless you have something.
No, I don't know what else I could tell you. I was sitting on the porch this morning thinking.
I was wondering about the store, a lumber store. Was there a time when there was a big boom in building around here, and you guys just couldn't keep up with the?
Oh yeah, we had a lot of very good, dedicated customers. The Hyde, Harold Hyde, and he lived over in Paradise. He had 5 daughters. One is still living, and they would buy everything from us. They weren't running all around the community trying to get, better prices. Yeah. They were dedicated customers. Yeah. And we really appreciated that. And and as I say, there were several of them. Most of them are gone now. I can still think of a couple. But and we always appreciated, of course, the business. And it was very good business too. We lived very comfortably on that. And but as I say, everything is changing.
I was wondering about, was it Mary Ann's grandfather that invented the Sprague? Or?
Yes.
So we're in this magnificent house that you live in, and you said you live.
We live next door.
So this was his house?
Mary Ann's grandfather built this house, and then Mary Ann's parents lived here. And Mary Ann had an aunt, Aunt Mary. She ran the lumber company. She was a businesswoman. Oh. She was very sharp. She quit school in the 4th grade and went and worked with her father in the store. Everybody knew Mary Price. Salesmen kind of shade away from Mary Price. She was very difficult, but she made a lot of money, and Well, right now I rent 10 houses, and it's all because of her.
I love that.
You know, she, and we have the first piece of price property here in Barrett Township. We have 150 acres that is the original price property. And, you know, it was, and we're trying to keep it, we never want to sell it. But never is kind of a long word. And, but it was funny. Marianne's mother told her mother she would never sell it. Marianne promised her mother she would never sell it. And, but we own the property from Weiler Brush. I don't know if you, Sand Spring Road out here, all the way down to, it almost comes all the way up to the back here. There's a little strip in here we don't own, or we owned all that. But it's a beautiful piece of property. There's a large pond on it, and the conservatory would like to have it, and because there's turtles and geese. It's a breeding ground for, it's beautiful when you go down there and walk up and watch. And it has a stream that goes down, it originally goes into the Broadhead Creek. And so, and there's an old farmhouse on it that we've restored, and we have a good caretaker down there. And so Price has been a big prominent name in this community.
Yeah, sure.
There are a lot of Price families, and yep, it's
Wow, that was fascinating.
it was. It is. Oh, I hope so.
Well, I thought it was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll call it a day then, if that's.
I'm sorry.
I guess we'll wrap it up then.
Okay, whatever.
Well, thanks very much, Mickey.
Uh-huh.
All right.
I hope I was some help to you. I kept putting it off.